Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today I wanted to talk about word relevancy with language learning. And I think that a lot of people have a question about, how do you learn all of these words when you're learning a language, right? Like what words are important to learn? How do I ever get to this point where I know all these thousands upon thousands of words, especially these words that maybe are a little bit less common? How do you approach this process? And I think that it's important to note that like you kind of go through these different phases when acquiring vocabulary in a language, right? So at the beginning, you're just kind of getting exposed to the language at first, right? You're probably learning some of the more basic words, very, very common words in a language. So, hello, question words, how do you say my name is this, right? Very basic phrases, basic words. And then after that, you slowly start kind of picking up more and more words that you probably would use in your average day, right? Like household items, names for your family, colors, days of the week, things like that. And then probably what happens for a lot of people is they kind of keep ramping and expanding their vocabulary into kind of more and more subject matters. And I think for a lot of people, they start using an SRS flashcard system, and those are great, right? It's great to pick up the 1,000 most common words in the language. You pick up a lot of common adjectives, a lot of common adverbs, verbs in the language, nouns, places. But then at that point, it gets tougher and tougher, right? Now, the words that you learn, once you've kind of gotten those high value, high impact words, it just becomes a lot harder to acquire some of these words, right? Because you don't see them very often. And I think that this can definitely happen when you use an SRS flashcard system and you've kind of gotten those very 1,000 most common words down and you start learning vocabulary where you just don't see it very often, right? Like just think of a random word like clown, right? Like how often do you say that in your average day? How often do you read that? Probably not very often, right? And so basically, you start learning some of these words in the SRS flashcard system. You slowly pick them up over time. Maybe it's a little bit tougher than some of these common words, but it's still kind of a struggle. It's still kind of hard, right? And it can feel a little just like boring and unmotivating because like you're not using these words, right? And like how do you pick up these relevant words? And that's why I think in a lot of cases eventually moving to compelling content is so important, and especially trying to use reading as a vocabulary acquisition tool, because at that point, not only are you having a lot of fun in the language, right? The process is less, just kind of boring or very rigid. You're having fun in the process, and then you're acquiring vocabulary at the same time. But the thing about it is that like when you read in a foreign language or you play video games or things like that, you are seeing specialized vocabulary in those subject matters. So, if you are playing a video game that is kind of more medieval based, you're going to see like words for medieval weapons. You're going to see medieval terms, and you're going to be exposed to that again and again until you're starting to learn those words and they become part of your long-term memory. Same goes with reading, right? If you're reading about cars, you start learning vocabulary related to the cars. And the thing about it is that you're learning vocabulary that is relevant for you, right? You want to read about cars because that's something you're interested in. You have a vested interest in wanting to, understand what's going on in the reading content or in the video game or whatever, and thus learning those words kind of has some sort of meaning to you. And not only that, because you're kind of having fun and you're seeing the same words again and again, it makes a lot of sense to learn these words, right? And then you're slowly acquiring them over time into that long-term memory. And then let's say you don't want to read about cars anymore, you want to try to read about politics. Now you're picking up politics words, right? You're not just picking up arbitrary words that you may use in a conversation later, you may encounter in a movie. You're learning content, you're learning words that are very relevant for you and the content that you consume. And while you might read about cars for a while, take a break from it for 2 or 3 months, and you might not see those words related to the cars and you go back to it, you'll be surprised that you'll pick up those words that you were learning related to the cars, very easily, very quickly. And I think that's a great way to kind of get a lot of uncommon words in the language, because that content is relevant for you, right? Whether it's your interest or it's just necessary to learn those words because that's the content that you're consuming in the video game, in the book that you're reading, in the movie that you're watching, or whatever. So especially past that 1,000 most common words in the language, or those common adjectives or adverbs, when you start using compelling content, especially reading, because reading is so effective and amazing for vocabulary acquisition, the words that you're learning, you see again and again because it's related to that subject. They pop up, and you're seeing that again and again, and that's helping you to have those words into your long-term memory slowly over time, right? So I think that when you talk about acquiring, just this vocabulary of thousands upon thousands of words, it happens slowly over time. But an effective strategy, in my opinion, in terms of getting words related to so many different subjects in the language, where you can talk about so many different things, is just reading content in various subjects, or just being exposed to a lot of different content, such that those words slowly come to you over time, versus kind of using a flashcard system as like an entire method to learn words that you may not see all that frequently, right? It's not to say that you don't use SRS flashcard systems, and using them kind of in a very specialized approach can be very helpful even at like later stages. I do think that when you use that relevant content for you, and then you're exposed to words that are relevant for you, that is just a great way to kind of slowly build that vocabulary over time. So that's what I had to say on word relevancy and language learning. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.